What's up, guys? 2-0 yesterday. Finally, a good day. Although I don't think the Houston Astros game went the way anybody expected, but they still came out with a win. Grayson Rodriguez still wasn't very good. Although the rookie pitcher for the Astros didn't go too deep into the game either. But it did come down to just being a ridiculous high scoring game with the Astros having a big lead and being able to hold on to it, win the game. And then the over also hit in that Oakland game, Oakland, Minnesota. So we have a similar situation today that I'm going to talk about in a minute. I have three plays here on this Saturday baseball card. We got first one up is going to be, as soon as I see Jared Jones on the slate, I always just kind of go and start looking. All right, like, what's the situation in this game here? Should I play Pittsburgh or should I play the under? Basically, this is Tampa is at Pittsburgh. Tampa beat Pittsburgh yesterday. I think they annihilated them. I think it was like 11-1 or something like that, right? No, 10-3. Excuse me. So the game was very high scoring, but the bullpens did not really get used. So I think you already know where I'm going with this. Pittsburgh used kind of an opener situation yesterday with Mlodzinski only going 1 2/3 to open the game. And they brought in Ortiz for 4 innings. They wound up using Jeffries for 3. So really, the only actual reliever that they even use is Fleming, and they only use him for 2 pitches. Whereas Tampa used like a few of their relievers, but not really their better relievers. So the bullpens are pretty intact for this game, which I like. So obviously, like I said, I'm going under in this one. We see the line kind of just sitting at 8 juice to the over at -120. Juice to the over at -120. I think I do see some 8.5s cropping up, but with a lot of juice on the under in those. So I think you can actually get under 8 at even money right now, though that scares me a little bit because it looks like it might be moving up a little bit. So you might be able to get under 8.5 at a little bit better than having to lay -120 or whatever as well. That may be possible. So you might be able to wait a little bit on this one, but I'm not sure because looking at the market percentages, we see 77% of the tickets on the over, public coming in on the over on this one for whatever reason. Maybe seeing yesterday's really high scoring game, I don't know, because Tampa and Pittsburgh aren't really known for having great offenses, and they don't. But we do see 98% of the cash on the under, so I do like all that. And of course, we got to look at the starting pitching matchup, and I do like this one. As far as it being an under, Zach Eflin is pitching for Tampa. He's got a 4.12 ERA, which doesn't look that good, but his 1.17 whip is good. He's got a 13-1 strikeout walk ratio in the month of June so far, including a pretty good outing against Atlanta, although he only went 5 2/3 in that one. He had a 7-1 strikeout walk ratio in that one, at least, against a tough Atlanta lineup. He hasn't been going as deep into games this month, which I guess is a little bit concerning, but I don't know if that's too concerning. Overall, this season, his numbers are pretty good. He has a 57-5 strikeout walk ratio, which is really insane. Not that many strikeouts, though, for 74 to third innings and 82 hits allowed. It's kind of a lot, so he's been a little bit hittable. So I do believe he is the worst of these two pitchers here, but I think he's good enough to help us get an under in this one against an offense that I don't know if they can totally take advantage of him. And again, like I said, his strikeout walk ratio is actually good. So it shows you he has command, even though he's not coming in and throwing so many strikeouts that he's like dominating people. But Pittsburgh, we have a decent sample size here with Pittsburgh's hitters, and Eflin has done pretty well against them. They're 8 for 48 off him lifetime with 1 double, 3 home runs, though, 6 RBIs, 17-4 strikeout walk ratio, a 167 batting average, and 606 OPS. So Pirates have not done very well against Eflin, so I think that's good. And then, of course, on the other side, Jared Jones, he's been struggling recently. His ERA is up to 3.76, which is still pretty good, obviously, especially for a rookie. 1.13 whip. Can't really complain about that. In the month of June, he's struggled with a 15-10 strikeout walk ratio, so that scares me a little bit. But if you look at his overall numbers on the season, I don't think there's that much to worry about. His starts this month have still actually been pretty good, except for the last one in Colorado. But pitching in Colorado is a totally different animal, really, with the elevation, and sometimes guys just don't pitch well there. So Jones had a rough outing there, but that could mean he's in a bounce back spot in this one to come back and pitch a better game in this one. Overall, this season, he's got 85 strikeouts and 22 walks in 79 innings. So good overall numbers. High strikeout rate, pretty good strikeout walk ratio. He's got pretty low number of hits allowed, 67 in 79 innings. So he's been still good overall. So I'm not going to look at these recent games as indicating as much, even though I know there are a lot of handicappers who look at that as being like recent form. But he gave up 0 and 2 runs in the games against the Dodgers in Minnesota, and then he put up that stinker in Colorado. So I think he's going to come back and bounce back from this. And then, of course, Tampa Bay, their hitters have never faced Jones before, so I think that gives him an extra edge, as I always say, when you have this good young pitcher with good stuff and these hitters haven't seen him before. They tend to have to adjust to him, and it takes a couple times facing him to adjust to him, so the pitcher has the advantage first couple times through the lineup. So that's where I'm going there. Under 8, I guess, at plus 100 is maybe the best way to go right now in that one in Pittsburgh at Tampa Bay. It is interesting. Oakland, Minnesota. I mean, we're in a situation similar to yesterday where we have 2 starting pitchers that just face these same teams, which is why I went with the over in yesterday's game. But that was because it was also 2 not very good pitchers who also had just been seen by these opposing lineups. They both just gotten blasted. That's not really as much the case in this one. This is Ober against Sears. I'm not going to play this game, but I think I would actually lean to Minnesota on this one. But I think you kind of have to lay a price in this one. I think Ober is the better of the 2 pitchers, and he had a nice bounce back start in his last start against Oakland. But now Oakland has just seen him, so maybe they'll do a little bit better this time. But Ober, still a pretty good pitcher. His ERA, I think, is just high, like higher than what his other stats would indicate it should be. I think it's like misleadingly high. JP Sears over on the other side is putting together a decent season, but his numbers against Minnesota aren't really that good. But you might say, well, he's going to be more motivated to beat Ober this time because he lost in the same matchup the previous time. Yeah, that might be true. But we'll see what happens there. I'm not playing that one, but we do have a similar spot where I am playing an over between 2 starting pitchers who aren't very good against their opponents, and we're just seeing, which I'll talk about now, actually. That's Toronto at Cleveland. So I'm taking the over in this one. Yesterday's game, I don't believe went over. I don't know what the total was, but it landed 7-1 with the Cleveland win. Carrasco actually did pretty well. So the one maybe slight issue we have here is that the bullpen situation isn't really that bad for these teams, but I think the starting pitching matchup is pretty bad, and it might get us into a situation where this is going to be a high-scoring game. Cleveland only used 2 relievers yesterday. Really, they just used a Vila to eat up most of the rest of the innings, and then Henkes for... how do you pronounce that? Henches? That doesn't sound right. For 3 pitches, so he's probably still available. And then Toronto kind of went with like an opener approach. Or, well, I don't know if they really were intending on going with an opener approach because they needed to throw a guy in there, and they used Rodriguez, I think is his name, was like this rookie guy who I played earlier in the season, I think, on a game that he was pitching. So they brought him back because they needed a starter, and I think they took him out. I don't think he was an opener. I think they took him out because he didn't do very well. So they had to use their bullpen a bit, but they still only wound up using 3 relievers. So there's not much going on with the bullpen situations there. But everything else about this, I like this to go over, so I am going to do it. We've seen the line shift from 8.5 juice to the under at minus 115 to 8.5 juice to the over, minus 123. 62% of the tickets on the over, so the over is public, but 74% of the cash on the over. So maybe the public isn't coming in hard enough on this one. I think really you have to play it over 9 at this point, I think is the better option. You see the 8 with juice, so you can get an over 9 at plus 102 right now, which even though 9 is the key number, excuse me, you'd still like to be under, getting a line that's lower than that. I don't necessarily want to lay the minus 120 on the over 8.5, although I wouldn't hate it either, really. But I think I prefer the 9 plus 102, and then you are, risking that if it hits 9, you're going to push instead of win. 9 being the key number, because if it's a 4-4 game, a team needs to score a run to break the tie. But I think it's okay. I do think we're going to get a high-scoring game here. These are 2 pitchers that just saw these opponents not long ago, and they did not do well. This was like 2 series ago or something. Cleveland faced Toronto, and this exact starting pitching matchup happened, I think, and it was not good for either pitcher. And what I like about this is that both pitchers have good-looking ERAs this year. and they're not actually indicative of how these pitchers actually perform against these opponents. So Barrios is pitching for Toronto, does have good numbers: 3.13 ERA, 1.12 WHIP, but he's not a guy that's coming in blowing people away. 65 strikeouts in 92 innings. He's only allowed 81 hits, which is good. He's kept the hits way down. 22 walks, not really that bad either, but he's not coming in and mowing hitters down. He's relying more on like non-powerful contact, basically. Like guys being fooled enough that they make contact, but they hit into outs essentially. But against Cleveland, he didn't really do that well last time out. 6 innings pitched, 8 hits allowed. Didn't walk anybody, but only had 1 strikeout and allowed 4 earned runs. So he was on the winning side of that game, and I think I lost on that game. I think I had Cleveland as the underdog. I liked Cleveland in that situation. But now this is a spot where I think both pitchers are not really in great spots here. Both pitchers in their last outing saw these opponents. So just like I said with Jones, or Jones has never been seen before by the opposing hitters, when you get opposing hitters who just saw you and they're used to seeing you, the hitters tend to have a little bit of an advantage against that pitcher they just saw because they are familiar with him. They just saw him. They know how to hit him. And in this case, neither of these pitchers even did that well in that game. And Barrios, we can look at the big sample size here. His history versus Cleveland is also not good. They're 30 for 94 off in lifetime with 4 doubles, 5 home runs, 18 RBIs, and 8.7 strikeout walk ratio. And it amounts to a high 319 batting average and 888 OPS, pretty high as well. So Barrios has not done well against Cleveland. And then on the other side, Ben Lively. People are going to look at this and think his numbers look good with a 3.02 ERA and 1.19 WHIP this year. And yeah, he does have pretty decent numbers this year. But again, just like Barrios, his strikeout numbers are kind of low. Not as low as Barrios's, but 52 strikeouts and 59 and 2/3. He's allowed 53 hits, which is pretty good. It's a low number of hits. And 18 walks. Not really that great, but okay, I guess. But similar to Barrios' numbers, really. So it's almost like they're mirror images of each other. And he didn't do well in the game against Toronto, only going 4 innings, allowing 6 hits, 4 earned runs, 3 walks, 4 strikeouts. Had a pretty rough outing in that one. So you might say, well, he's going to be more motivated to bounce back here. Yeah, but like I said, Toronto has a pretty decent lineup. They have good hitters in this lineup, and they just saw Lively and did well against them. And now, being familiar with them, more familiar with them, I don't think that it's going to get that much better for Lively, even though there could be some sort of regression to a mean here. But I think we're playing the situation here, and these hitters just saw both of these pitchers. Lively against Toronto, most of this is from that game, but Toronto's hitters are 7 for 21 off him with 1 home run, 2 RBIs, a 4.3 strikeout walk ratio. It's a 333 batting average and 893 OPS. So small-ish sample size, and a lot of it is from that previous game, that start that he had against them, where going into that game, I kind of like that he was more unfamiliar to them, but now he's not, and he didn't do well in that game. So that's going to be an over in the Cleveland-Toronto game, over 9, I guess, at plus 102. And then I finally will be on one side, where I think this is a pitching mismatch, even though we are taking starting pitchers having to pitch in Colorado and not familiar with that environment, but I'm going to go with it anyway. I am going to play on the Washington Nationals in this one at Colorado, even though Washington did win yesterday as well, and I think they won it easily. The market looks like it's heavily indicating on Washington here. To me, Washington opened plus 102 as an underdog, and they flipped to minus 108 as a kind of tiny favorite here with 78% of the cash on them, but 79% of the tickets over on the other side on Colorado. Not really sure why that's the case, why the public would be on this pretty awful Colorado team with an awful record. Don't know why, but we do see the favorite is flipped to Washington. I agree with it. I think you're playing them just to win the game here, and I think there's a decent chance they're going to do that with this starting pitching matchup. Washington won yesterday, so you might think, well, Colorado's going to bounce back here. I'm not entirely sure of that. So we do have a situation where, Colorado did have an embarrassing game, but they're just not a very good team, man. So I don't know if they're really going to bounce back from that. Both teams used 4 relief pitchers yesterday, but I think Colorado's bullpen got more taxed in that one, as Hudson had a terrible start and only went 3 innings. Colorado ended up having to use their bullpen for 110 or so pitches, whereas Washington only used theirs for about 70. One of their guys, Floro, only went 6 pitches, so he might not even be unavailable this time. The other guys Washington used aren't really their better relievers. They used a couple to eat up some innings, too. So I think Washington's bullpen is overall the better bullpen. I mean, Colorado's got nothing to really like at all. And really, I think they're at a disadvantage against most teams. But the situation, I think Washington's bullpen not only is the better bullpen, but is a little bit more rested. And then we look at the starting pitching matchup. And this is Mitchell Parker, pretty decent young arm in Washington's rotation here. I think they just brought him up this year. I think he's new to the league this year, and he's got a 3.06 ERA and 1.08 WHIP. That's all pretty good, man. Even though I don't like his 12-7 strikeout walk ratio this month. I don't know what else to say about that. He struggled this month, but looking over at overall, his numbers have been better. He's coming off a good start against Miami, which I don't think you have a letdown after you face Miami. Miami is a terrible team, so you just go in, you beat them, get in, get out of there. He's got a 50-15 strikeout walk ratio on the season, so that's better than what he's had this month. So I'll look at that more because that's just a larger sample size to work with, really. But he's not really a guy that comes in and strikes a lot of guys out. That's in 67 2/3 innings, but he's also only allowed 58 hits, and he's kept the long ball down, only allowing 6 home runs. So he's been pretty good overall. The 15 walks is maybe a little bit high and not really striking out that many guys, but he's been able to still have command of his pitches, fool pitches. They're not able to hit him that well. And the fact that he counters the long ball might help him in an environment like Colorado. Although you might say, well, Colorado's going to affect him and, cause him to allow more long balls than he usually would. Well, maybe, because that's the case with every pitcher, because their elevation is, they're at a high elevation, so thin air. You allow more home runs there. But Parker's a guy who hasn't allowed that many home runs this season, so guys haven't really been hitting him for home run power necessarily. So I think that might help him actually counter the elevation issue in Colorado. So that's all good. And then, of course, Colorado has never seen him before. So I think Parker's going to have the advantage there. Being a decent young arm and facing these hitters who have never seen him before, I think they're going to have to adjust to him. Like I just said with Jones, these hitters have to come in and they don't necessarily know what to expect the first couple times through the lineup. So I think that could be the case here. And Parker, also lefty, I think kind of adds to the situation a little bit because there are fewer lefties and the arm angles are usually a bit different and the hitters have to get used to that too. So I think Parker will have the advantage there. And he's up against Cal Quantrill, who's been one of the not terrible starting pitchers for Colorado this year. I don't know what else you can say about that, but I think his stats, his ERA is a little bit misleading at 3.43, which looks good, but he's got a 1.3 WHIP, so that's not good. He's got a 59-33 strikeout walk ratio this year. I mean, that's not good. That's way too many walks. The number of strikeouts is pretty low. In 84 innings pitched, he's not coming in and striking guys out. I mean, he's given up 76 hits, which has helped him. He's kept the hit numbers down, but those walks are way high. And he's only allowed 8 home runs, so he's actually been decent at keeping the ball in the yard, pitching in this home run conducive environment, really. So that's been impressive that he's also counteracted the home runs like that, but he's just not a very great pitcher, man. And this month he's really struggled with that 10-10 strikeout walk ratio in 4 starts, allowing more than 1 hit per inning. That's not great. He's struggling recently and overall this season, I would say, even though his ERA doesn't make it look like it. And against Washington, we have a small sample size here, but they have seen him before, and they're 9 for 25 off him lifetime with a double, a home run, 3 RBIs, 7-4 strikeout walk ratio. It's a 360 batting average, which is pretty high, and 968 OPS. So I'm going to play Washington. You can play them at minus 112, I guess might be the best. So those 3 baseball plays today for the big Saturday card. 2 totals and a side under 8 at even money right now. I think is the best number in Tampa and Pittsburgh. Over 9 at plus 102 in Toronto and Cleveland, although wouldn't mind over 8.5 minus 120 either. I just like the cheaper price, really, man. I'm a cheapskate. And then Washington Nationals minus 112 in their game at Colorado. That's going to do it for me, man. Let's have a good one. Hopefully we're starting something with yesterday's 2-0. We're going to get back on track, get back to breaking even, and actually have a winning year again this year. Because the last 2 years were terrific. My best 2 years ever, and I still only lost in 2015. So I don't want to have a second losing year, man. But it's the nature of the game. Let's go. Peace.